Shoes might come off at some point.
I was literally thinking that.
Okay.
You're so nervous.
Welcome to the Marvelous Mystonic Muggles podcast.
Yay.
I am one of your hosts, Maralen, and this is
LaTresha.
This is my BFF.
Besties for
My Biffle.
Biffle. Yeah, that's what she said.
You need to cut it. Yes, we have been best friends for 30 years, and we decided to start this podcast because we got some shit to say. You know what I'm saying?
A lot.
It's a lot. It's a lot. So we're here to unpack, unwind, relax, laugh, cry, whatever it is. We want to create this safe space, and we're going to be talking about so many different things, from domestic violence, starting off today's topic, sexual assault, dinosaurs, Harry Potter, yes, one end of the expecto patronum. One end of the spectrum to the other. And talking about spectrums, we are both autistic and have ADHD. You're welcome.
Welcome.
So, glad you're here. Thanks for joining us today on our first episode, and we're so excited to have you here. We're so excited to talk about these things and put them out in the open, to relate, to build community, and have a safe place for everybody to come and feel heard and validated and seen. And we're just excited to be here. Things might get weird. I might take my shoes off because of sensory thing. I've got my fidget, but
It's a poppet and a fidget spinner all in
pop
one.
it, smack it, twist it. Okay. My name is Maralen, and last January I left a 12-year domestic violence relationship. High five to me.
Yep.
Yeah, so I have been in the process of healing, recovering, navigating through litigation, the family court system, DHS, police, all of these beautifully flawed systems that do not protect women and children from domestic violence. So I'm going to be unpacking that with you guys and what that looks like, what my case looks like now, but particularly today, I just wanted to introduce myself, and as a mother, I'm a creator, do so many different things. I'm a jack of all trades, jewelry making, hair, every typical ADHDer that doesn't work in corporate America. So that is me. But I have 4 kids, 2 bonus babies, and 2 biological babies that I birthed out of my fupa. And they are the best things ever. Best things. My kids are also neurodivergent, and they are literally the most fantastic human beings on the planet, and I really enjoy being a mom. We're going to have a lot of episodes about mom talk as well.
Yes.
What that looks like being neurodivergent, raising neurodivergent kids. So,
Yes.
I'm excited.
Yeah.
But yeah.
I am LaTresha, mother of 2 boys whom are also neurodivergent, autistic ADHD, teenagers. They're great kids. I love them. Genuinely, they're so good. I am a survivor of domestic violence, multiple sexual assaults, just a whirlwind of a life that happened, I mean, up until recently, but most of it happened like in my teenage years. And I remember I used to say, you know, I've been through more things in my life as a teenager than most adults have been. But I mean, understanding now that there's so many people in the world that have gone through the same things that I've gone through.
Yeah.
But yes, I'm excited to talk about all of those things, my life experiences, and how that has shaped me into the person that I am today.
Yeah.
And I also love being a mother. I have so much fun with my kids. Like, we play. My 15-year-old thinks that I'm crazy, but I like it. Yeah. It's okay though. He laughs at me and that's all that matters. Anyways, yeah, that's just kind of me in a nutshell. I'm a ray of sunshine that can sometimes get caught on fire.
Word. Word.
Okay, so like Maralen was saying, we are going to be talking about domestic violence and domestic abuse today because of the fact that that has been so prominent, not only in both of our lives, but in her life and the situation that she particularly is currently going through, like what she was saying with the court systems and battling for her children. I can say I am one of the few lucky ones whose baby daddy, that term is so gross, anyways, is kind, and so I'm grateful and I can show appreciation for that dynamic in the relationship and the co-parenting that him and I have created. It took a little while to get there, but we're here. But her situation is a situation that I never had to experience, not even as a child, with my parents divorcing and going through what they went through. But it's very...
That's a good perspective because you are a child of divorce as well.
Yeah. And my parents are best friends.
Mm-hmm.
And so to me, I always thought it was normal for parents to be best friends after they divorced.
Yeah.
And so learning that that's not really how it works in society, it was eye-opening.
Right.
It was very, like, oh wow, like we're the oddballs out, not the other way around. But I am grateful to my parents for normalizing that, though, for being co-parents with each other. I mean, their relationship is a lot to unpack, but but just normalizing.
Sorry, Mom.
Yeah. Normalizing what co-parenting is supposed to look like.
Yeah.
And so then, me not understanding, but why can't we get along?
Right.
Why can't we be friends? Why can't we co-parent? Because it's not about us as adults, it's about the children and their safety. And so, my parents really genuinely setting that example of, that it's okay that you're not together. That doesn't mean you have to hate each other. My stepmom of 18 years said one day that she felt like she was on an episode of Reba. Because they all, my mom worked with my stepmom. And my little brother and little sister that with my dad and stepmom have always referred to my mom as Aunt Teresa.
Yeah.
And so it's just in that aspect that I'm grateful for that.
Yeah.
And so I'm really excited. I mean, we'll talk about that all, like I'll go more in depth on stuff like that in a later day, but I'm just really excited to dig deep into your experience and be able to talk about that, not only from you who have experienced it and is currently experiencing it, but also being able to talk about it from the perspective as your best friend.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I'm excited as well. That's a great, like you said, a really fortunate perspective to be able to have, because not everybody has got to experience that healthy co-parenting through navigating through divorce. And I think majority of society navigates through divorce in such a negative way. It has a very, very negative connotation, and that just comes from a lot of unawareness, uneducation, not knowing, and there's so much pressure on children that adults put on children to be resilient, that they won't remember, they're fine, they're okay, but nobody ever sits and asks a child whether they're okay or not, or how they feel about the situation. They're just so programmed and indoctrinated to be okay, and that they can get through anything. If they're young, they won't remember it. And
resilient.
Yeah, that term resilient is really bothersome to me in regards to how society views children processing traumatic experiences. And we're definitely going to get into the neurological and scientific standpoint behind the damage that happens when trauma gets stored into the body, and what that looks like from a scientific standpoint in later episodes. Like the physical conditions that can manifest from that, the brain damage, the shrinking of the hippocampus, like all of those things are very prominent in cases like mine, for instance. And so just understanding that kids are human beings, and children they don't have to be resilient. And we're definitely going to unpack, like what resilience looks like for each of us, and how that word resonates particularly. But I want to start off talking about, I'm going to unpack a little bit of, where to go? Delete. So this last week, for instance, now one of these cases I want to talk about as kind of like an introduction to mine is a case that happened in April of this year. And let me see here. It happened in April. So, get my thoughts together.
What does that look like?
What?
Getting thoughts together.
I was really intrigued. Okay, so Steve and Claire worked as a nurse practitioner, and this story just really kind of like is really triggering. So just like fair warning to anybody listening, things that we're talking about on this podcast can be very triggering, and it's going to be uncomfortable, and that's okay. But Mariah Lee Gardner and her husband Stephen, I believe, had 4 children together, and the day before, Stephen tried to kill her. He had dropped flowers, love letter off on the doorstep the morning of. He was sending her funny texts hours before. They were even FaceTiming. She never knew that he was going to be planning her death until the gun was in her face. and he had never hit her, never physically harmed her until the day that he broke multiple bones, shot her multiple times. And in Stephen's case, he literally tried to murder his entire family and successfully ended up murdering their 11-month-old, who died just like a few days later from internal bleeding. It was very horrific and graphic, stabbing wounds, and these cases like this, society just doesn't understand, or maybe they do, which I think a lot of it is willful ignorance. Like, they're just not wanting to acknowledge that these things are happening, because obviously we're not changing any laws to do anything better about them, which is why they keep happening. Because victims aren't believed, but it's 500 more times dangerous for a woman to leave her domestic violence relationship than any other time. And 10% of physical violence is all that makes up domestic violence, which typically doesn't even occur until the end of the relationship, when a victim is trying to escape, is when their behavior escalates. And I'm really highlighting on narcissistic abusers in particular, because a lot of narcissistic abuse, the majority of it, happens behind closed doors. It's never in the forefront in public. Most of society focuses on the physical aspect of abuse. Do you have a bruise? Do you have a broken bone? Not understanding the psychological abuse, the emotional abuse, verbal, which is all under the umbrella of psychological abuse in general. The extreme gaslighting. There's so many components that are not physical. But all of these lead to physical symptoms in the body. It can cause chronic illnesses, short-term memory loss, shrinking of the hippocampus, reducing the gray matter in the brain. And so another story from this last week was this young mother named Sam. She actually lived right down the street from my house. I had a couple of high school friends that personally knew her. Not even a month after the assault, let me refresh. Okay. Refresh. This is what it's like working with ADHD individuals. Oh my goodness. Okay. So Chase Ainsworth and Simon Ainsworth were married. She goes by, Chase Ainsworth and Samantha Ainsworth. They were husband and wife. They call her Sam for short. And Sam was murdered, and her son was kidnapped right after that. And in front of her 7-year-old. Yes. Sam's case is such a big deal because for people that love to victim shame and blame victims of domestic violence for, why didn't you call? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do? They're always blaming the victim instead of the perpetrator's behavior. It's never directed towards, why did this person abuse? It's always directed towards the victim, that they are responsible for the abuser's behavior. Sam was a victim that did everything by the book of what you're supposed to do, and nothing was done. From VPOs to multiple police reports to multiple domestic violence disturbances, and the state of Oklahoma failed Sam in every way. And I stand on this hill, I will die on this hill, that the state of Oklahoma is responsible for her death, because just like many others in the state.
Yeah, we're number 3 in the
Yeah.
nation for domestic violent homicides.
Yes. Number 3, okay? And he had 2 misdemeanors, a felony. They never sent out a warrant for his arrest, and they allowed someone to bond him out of jail whenever he was arrested. And this is such a common thing with violent offenders and domestic violence, of allowing people to bond out violent offenders. So her death could have been prevented. It absolutely could have, but it wasn't, because the state of Oklahoma didn't think that this man was dangerous enough to keep him locked up away from his victims so he could not further harm them, and then he did. Another one from last week was, I believe her name was Gwendolyn. She was a registered OBGYN in North Carolina, and was in the middle of custody litigation after leaving her domestic violence abuser, and her ex-partner, had shot her multiple times, gunned her down in a public park. So this is another branch off from this, is that during custody litigation, that is also when victims of domestic violence and their children are at more risk.
Yes, because at that moment the perpetrator is being exposed.
Yes.
And for a while they want to try to put on a good show,
Yeah.
and mind their P's and Q's, but at some point it gets too hard. And so the easiest solution to that problem is to do away with the person that is exposing them.
Well, to add to that, like, abusers don't like to have accountability.
Right.
So in most cases, when abusers get exposed in any type of way, or they feel like they are going to be incriminated or anything like that, they will do many different things to escape that as much as possible.
Right.
One is like the recency effect, where they're basically love bombing the entire justice system. Okay, it's like putting on a show. Now they're involved in the children's school. Now they're doing all of these things that they hadn't been doing to make it look like they're the all-around good parent, or whatever the case may be. They're the ones that are calm, cool, and collective in court, which, if court officials would have any education or training on domestic violence and narcissistic behavior, they would be able to pick up on these emotional cues, because they always look to the victim as being, discombobulated, which we are, unhinged or crazy or overly emotional, and like those are all signs of abuse, of being emotionally dysregulated, not be able to hold composure, because anyone that's ever entered a courtroom, it is automatic, like you get PTSD from being in there. So it's an uneasy feeling every time you're stepping into the courtroom, and having to face your abuser time and time again in these courtrooms in front of people, and having to have complete strangers invalidate your lived experiences. And like in my case, in one of our court hearings, when my VPO, my children were taken off of my emergency VPO, like the judge looked at me in my face and said, "You need to get along with him. I'll see you in 3 months."
Yeah.
And so these are how abusers continue post-separation abuse, which is where they are able to abuse their victims through the justice system, like by draining them financially, harassing them, like harassment by proxy, for instance, where narcissistic abusers don't have to directly abuse you themselves. They will get peers, new supplies, family members, or whatever to harass you, whether it's through social media, following you, stalking you. It could look like so many different things. There was something else I was going to say in regards to I forgot it was like at the beginning. Hold on. I guess I was just saying, like, I mean, this is such an issue overall. Like, our justice system is super, super flawed.
Yes.
And again, there's not enough training, education, mandatory training on these areas. So these mental health professionals, whether it's DHS, police officers who should have mental health training, be able to recognize these signs, there is none, you know. And so telling a victim to do this or file this or whatever, it doesn't work.
Yeah. And one thing I wanted to say whenever you were talking about Samantha Ainsworth was, she had a protective order against her ex-husband, and he violated that. And every time, because it was multiple times, he violated it, she called and reported it.
Mm-hmm.
And they did nothing.
Yeah.
And their excuse for not doing anything was that they were backlogged.
Mm.
So why are you going to require victims
Mm-hmm.
to get a protective order, and then when the perpetrator violates that protective order, you do nothing?
Yeah.
Because then all that does is just, it puts the victim in more harm's way, because then the perpetrator is mad
Mm-hmm.
that you went and got a protective order against them.
It's just like, you know, Enough with Jennifer Lopez.
That's what I was just thinking. Yeah.
It's just like that, because, you know, when she went to the police station, if anyone's ever seen that movie, it's phenomenal.
It's phenomenal.
I feel like it's like my life story.
Oh, right.
But if you haven't seen it, I would definitely watch it. But she goes into the police station, you know, and is kind of using third person language to ask, like, what do you do if
you have a friend?
If you have a friend, you know, that's in this situation or whatever. And, you know, they talk about filing a BPO, and she's like, what is that, a little piece of paper? And what does that do when this person violates this piece of paper? Do I throw it at them? You know what I mean? And will you call the police? And it's like, those don't work. They don't work. It doesn't work. And I know, like, the day that I actually left, you know, let me backtrack. So abusers will also do things that this falls under manipulation, of course. They will, you know, after years and decades of like gaslighting you, you know, making you feel like you're crazy, you know, beating you down, belittling you, verbally, emotionally abusing you. This is all to get you to literally be so isolated, be so completely dependent on them. And when doing those things, like, they want you to look like the abuser or the crazy one in other people's eyes, because when they can get you to emotionally react in any type of way, and I'm not talking about physically, I'm talking about just producing an emotional reaction, like crying or like, please stop, or, you know, if you raise your voice in any way, you know, after you've been provoked or whatever, they do this intentionally to be like, see, look at you, why are you yelling? Like, look at how crazy you're being. Yeah, and
you're being so aggressive right now.
Right, and it fucks with your head.
Yeah.
And it really does. And when this happens day after day, and then you get doses of love bombing, which is an emotionally abusive tactic that particularly narcissistic abusers use to entrap their victims very early on. It starts at the very beginning of a relationship.
Yeah.
I want to be with you. You're my soulmate. I'll do everything for you.
You have so much in common.
You have so much. You're my favorite color, purple. His favorite color is purple. Like, everything. I want to take care of you. You know, they will
We're going to do all of these things.
Yeah, get to know future promises, future faking. We're going to go on these trips. You know, like for me, in the beginning, he knew that I had medical issues, you know, all of these things. And so they will get to know you, get to know your family, the ins and outs of you. And it happens so quick. It's very, very, very fast, like very, very fast. And when they do this, it's so that they're like building a case with you. Like it's like a log, you know, like a computer log of all the information they need on you to entrap you. And once they have this, it's easier because they use vulnerability against you. And like for people that have ADHD or on the spectrum, we hyperfixate.
Yeah.
And so those can often overlap in many cases, like narcissism and ADHD. And so a lot of people might look at victims and be like, well, you're the narcissistic one or like whatever, but not understanding that when you're on the spectrum, and everyone is different, of course, that's why it's a spectrum, but you can be hyperfixated, and especially if you are operating out of a trauma body, the hyperfixation is even more prominent because you've been so deprived from love or whatever it is. Maybe you grew up in a really dysfunctional and chaotic household. You weren't shown what unconditional love looks like. That yearn for that, they will be all of that. They will do all of that. They will be your knight in shining armor, opening car doors, doing all of the things that you have ever wanted. And then once they entrap you and they know that they have you, then that's when they can peel the mask off. And it happens, you know, sometimes it might happen very quickly, sometimes it happens subtly, you know, but there are times, there's abusers that will literally like spend a year getting to build that with you. And, you know, if they are very determined and disciplined in that manner, because when they want something, they have to have it. And they will do anything to get that thing because you're an object to them. You're not a person.
Yeah.
You're an object for display. That's why it's a supply. You're just a new supply. And they have many supplies. It's not just you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, let's get into some of these questions that I have for you.
Sure.
Okay. When did you first realize you were in a domestic violent relationship? Like, when did you first realize that that's what the relationship was?
In all honesty, probably wasn't even until probably like 6 months before I left, to be honest. Like,
which time?
The last time. Because I was in a state of denial the other times. And so, like, the first time I tried to leave him in 2018, I was...
Yeah, that was going to be, I think, my next question. I mean, no, it's fine. Answer it. Like, because how many times did you try to leave before you stayed gone?
Yeah.
Yeah?
4. So the first time, somehow I came across learning about narcissism and things like that, and I was more so like focused on my relationship with my mother and what that dynamic looked like and my upbringing in the abuse that I endured as a child. And then I started noticing that a lot of these characteristics and behaviors were the same things that I was seeing in my marriage. And so that was really hard for me to unpack. And plus, you know, abusers have a really convincing way, which is gaslighting in a nutshell, of making you think that they are abusing you because they love you. And again, if you've grown up in chaos and dysfunction, that was your norm, even though your body can feel that something is wrong. You've been so subjected to and conditioned to think that mistreatment is a normal thing, or that it's out of love. You know, I love you. I'm doing this because I love
you.
Yeah, like if you get whoopings as a child and grew up in a super religious household, you know, like that's what it was. You know, and so I really had that
hurts
confusion.
me more than it hurts you.
Yes, that part. But because he would say things, I remember when I tried to leave the first time, he made a comment to me, and he said, well, I did this for you. And he's like, because look at you now. And I was like, what? And he said that he mistreated me that way so that I would develop tough skin, because I need to understand how the real world is. So that's another thing too, that's not just common in narcissistic abuse, but in society in general, that as a whole, that always projects that the real world is going to be unkind and unforgiving and violent, and all of these projections that get instilled in you as a child, and that's not reality. Like, why can't we teach that the world can be kind, and that the world can be generous and joyful and all of these other things, instead of projecting fear all the time?
Yeah,
you know,
I mean, that's true.
But to finish your question, I truly didn't. I had a level of awareness, but because when you're in those situations, you are addicted to that behavior, and it's not on a conscious mindset. It's unawareness, and you become addicted to the highs and lows. I mean, this is clinically from a scientific standpoint, because it releases cortisol, okay, your stress levels up and down all the time. Your dopamine levels, you get a rush of dopamine whenever you're love bombed, and you get those little breadcrumbs of niceness, and you get affection, and you get physical touch, and then, you know, but then it turns into living in a chronic state of hypervigilance, which our bodies aren't meant to do, by living in a chronic state of stress. You know, and that's where you get this, and forward head posture, and chronic disease, you know. So it took me many times, because I didn't want to see the reality that was in front of me. I wanted to see the picture that I was painting him to be, and because I had such hope, and
because of those little glimpses,
but also because I could see his humanity as a person. I truly could, and I could see that this was a human being that was hurting, and so I thought it was my job to fix that. So I became the rescuer, the saver, the fixer, the people pleaser, the codependent. Correct. Yes. Everything revolved around me carrying that emotional labor and being responsible for his emotional well-being. And so, I mean, I even have past emails, you know, from 10 years ago showing that I was always apologizing for his bad behavior.
Yeah.
You know, like he would mistreat me or physically hurt me or throw something at me. And because I wanted to keep the peace and I was walking on eggshells, it's like, you know, quiet the bear, tame the bear.
I'm sorry I did that.
I'm sorry, like, let's just have a good day, you know, and yeah.
Yeah. So a minute ago you brought up awareness. So speaking of that, how did you feel whenever you came into the awareness that the domestic violence was happening? But not only the awareness in your last relationship, but the awareness in other previous relationships, like the pattern of, like, whenever you became aware that being attracted to people, not just romantically, but but being attracted to people who share these narcissistic tendencies, how did that awareness make you feel? Do you see what I'm saying?
Like shit.
Yeah.
Like complete shit. Like I like just wanted to sink into the couch. And my second oldest daughter, we were watching The Maid on YouTube. On Netflix. And at this point, he had returned from his deployment at that time. This was in 2021. And I was planning on leaving him during that time. So this was my third attempt at leaving him. And, I was getting my stuff in order. I had received, the pandemic unemployment pay, things like that. And I was really gonna do it. I was gonna leave again, because it's like as soon as he was gone, it was like a peace, just washed over the house. The kids scattered out of their rooms like roaches. Like it was just, such an energy shift. And then in that moment I had realized, oh shit, I fucking stayed again, and so it's like I kept having these aha moments. And then during this whole time, I was doing self-healing work. I was participating in Reiki sessions and meditation and reading, Brene Brown, like some great mentors that I had come to really love through reading, and Eckhart Tolle, and that really helped me along my healing journey and just having an awareness. And it's so funny because like throughout this time I was still doing all of this educational research and work with narcissism, like reading books, emotionally immature parents, like dating a psychopath or something like that, like educating you on these different personality types and all of these things. And every book I read, I'm like, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. But still, I had such a denial, and two, being raised in a religious household, there was such a shame around divorcing and breaking up the home and all of these things. And then, my hope was like, I can help him. We can grow together. He can change. I want my kids to have a father, and like all of these, things that I was telling myself. And even though they were coming from a well-intended place, that didn't excuse or erase the damage that had already been done, and that was still happening. And so I didn't really want to see that. And plus, I was terrified of him. I was extremely fearful of him. I was truly scared of him up until that point. And there was some fear still lingering, but it was like when we were watching that, and he had came home, was love bombing, and during that time, he had actually manipulated the military to send him home. He was supposed to be gone for 4 months, and he ended up only being gone for 2, because he used the suicide threat again. And this is very common with narcissistic abusers. They will threaten to self-harm or commit suicide in order to get the victim to stay. And so I want to make this very clear, because men's mental health is very real. It absolutely is. Their suicide rates are extremely high. But this is not what I'm talking about in this case. Narcissistic abusers manipulate their victims by using threats of suicide to prevent them from being able to leave. This is a rehooking game, and it's very, very manipulative, because what it does is it's a point of deflection, and it takes the light off of the abuser's behavior, and what the victim does is it returns the victim back to the abuser's control, because now the victim becomes concerned with the abuser all over again, and we need to get you help, and I'm here for you, and you're not alone. Like, all of these things.
We'll do it together.
Yeah, but being an empath, you know,
Yes.
just like, which for me, an empath is literally just a child that was raised to regulate their parents' emotions.
Yeah.
Like, that's what, so I say I'm a recovering empath.
Yeah.
Because I ain't in charge of regulating nobody's shit. But, we're not orangey over here regulating.
We're not. Oh, orangey. I don't know why I thought you said orangey in. And I was like, what is that? Tell me about
I'm touching
it.
my mic. But yeah, it's a complete manipulation tactic to
Yes.
re-trap all over again. And so, you know, I fell for it. I stayed, you know, the promises of therapy, promises of getting help, which was super strange to me, him being in the military, that the military would hear something like that and then allow him to go on a vacation for a week.
Yeah. Yeah. I have a question
Okay.
kind of like that in here.
Okay.
But I'll get to it in a
Okay.
minute. Because I don't want to lose my place.
Yeah, you're fine.
How did you feel when you realized that your children were affected just as much as you were?
Ooh.
Because you came into the awareness first for yourself,
Yeah.
like realizing, you know, this is what this is. So then after, was it like an epiphany, like, oh my God, my children are literally experiencing this just as much as I am? Was it that kind of thing, or was it oh, he's just like that with me?
No, because he had always been abusive with the children. So it was like one of those things through therapy, because mind you, I had been going to therapy for 3 years. And well, at that time too, I had started therapy at the end of 2020. You know, and so it wasn't even until like my 5th therapy session where I was honest about my relationship. You know, because I was wanting to pretend and everything is great, everything is good, you know, and she's like, honey,
Yeah.
welcome, I see you. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like once I finally like, oh, she's like, there she is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and I was grateful that she just let me just play it out as long as I wanted to, you know?
Yeah, she was
But-
gonna listen.
I think it was, honestly, that's a really tough question. I know that I always had an awareness in the back of my head, but it took therapy to realizing, because I always was so set on, like, I'm not going to become my mom. I'm not going to do the same things. And I had that awareness very early on, you know, which is why I was so, like, outspoken as a child anyway. Like, I was not going to take that, you know.
Yeah.
I'll go live at somebody else's house at 15, you know. But it took going to therapy to realize that I actually became more like my father.
Yeah.
In that dynamic, that I became the more passive parent that was trying to, I was walking on eggshells, I was people pleasing, and I was not able to shield my children, because I shielded them as much as I could, but I really couldn't do anything, because I was also a victim in that.
Right.
And I was also fearful of him. And so that was really hard for me to, because, you know, it took a lot of therapy and self-awareness and reading and things like that to gain the confidence to be able to even use my voice to him.
Well,
you know?
it took you starting therapy to even be able to actually use your voice for yourself.
For myself, yeah.
To say out loud, this is what this relationship is.
Right.
And because you could think it in your head.
Yeah.
But speaking those words out loud, you know, that's very difficult because then that makes it real and it's not just a thought in your brain.
Ooh, yeah.
You know?
Yeah. And plus I didn't have nobody knew.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So,
nobody
to
knew.
some extent,
yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, like, nobody,
well,
and now, like, that things are exposed, you know, like, I've had people come to me and say, like, I always knew something, but I couldn't put my finger on it, even in your eyes. Weirdo. But, yeah, I
just
think.
a weirdie.
I think,
Let's see what I
yeah, that's a really tough question.
Yeah.
That's a good question.
So how do you feel about these relationships now? Like with your exes or, you know, and then other types of relationships that you've been in that, you know, where you've been hurt and abused one way, shape, form, or fashion. Like, how do you feel about coming to terms with everything? What does that feel like for you?
Whew. Feels like freedom.
That was literally the word that was
Yeah.
in my brain.
Yeah, it feels like freedom because I've never been a person that like wished harm on anybody or anything, but I had a lot of wounds and immaturity, you know, about myself that because I didn't know myself. Like, I didn't know who I was. My identity was always wrapped up in other people and other people telling me who I should and shouldn't be. And then plus I was unaware that I was autistic and had ADHD too. So most of my life has been like imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
So to me, it's been one of my greatest gifts. Like, my suffering through these experiences has turned out to be one of the greatest gifts that I could have ever been given, because through these sufferings and through this pain, through the grief, I have been able to return home. And that doesn't negate that behavior. It doesn't
mean that you deserved it.
No,
or
no.
that it's your fault.
No, none of that. I just have more of a, and it may seem weird as fuck to say. People can look at it however they want to, but for me, you know, I will never wish it to happen. I would never want it to happen again. It should have never happened in the first place, but because it did happen, it became a gateway for my self-awareness. It became a gateway for my own healing work. It became a gateway for me to recognize these behaviors and for me to self-examine the lack of love that I had for myself, the lack of worthiness that I had for myself, because I was always living out other people's projections. And I had really absorbed those projections as my truth.
Yeah.
Like, I was living those things as if they were true. And so
you were gaslighting yourself.
I was 150 million and 10%.
Realizing in that moment that that's what was happening.
Because I didn't even know what that term was anyway. You know, like, I think it was like maybe 2 years ago when I first found out what gaslighting even was. and that's
crazy to think where that term came from.
Yeah, it's hard to unpack that though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like, it's a very hard thing, but I will say it's like once you're out of these dynamics, it's literally like a veil. Like, picture like a bride veil. It's like the veil has been lifted and you can finally see, hear, taste, smell, experience everything that you have never experienced before, because the veil that was over you during that time, it is such a brain fog. And so that's what makes it so difficult being in these situations, because of the extensive brain fog. And you don't have an awareness. Like, you're in such a state of denial. You're being gaslit every single day. Like, slap you in your face. What are you talking about?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do that. Like, so then you're constantly second guessing yourself, whether situations happened or not. Did my keys get moved? They were just there 30 minutes ago. Like, all of these things that really fuck with your head and make you question yourself, your morals, your values, like all of this stuff, and trying to remain intact. You know what I mean?
Right, yeah.
And so whenever I left that situation for good, there was so much grief involved in that.
Yeah.
And it comes in waves. Like, grief, comes in waves. That's a whole other podcast.
Yes. Yeah. So, okay. So
Yeah.
going back, talking about like the gaslighting, the manipulation, all of that stuff. Talk for a moment about the confusion your brain experienced from the years of manipulation and conditioning, and then coming into consciousness, and how that became a battle.
Ooh.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like the conditioning versus Maralen and her conscious state.
It was a lot of mental chatter. It's called the monkey mind. It's a lot of ego.
Side note, I'm really proud of myself that I did not start just making monkey noises, because it was in my brain and my lips moved.
If you need to do it,
and I caught myself.
It is a lot of of noise, because again, you hold these things to such a pedestal from what other people have told you, things that you can, like, why can't you remember shit? You always forget shit, so then that becomes I forget everything all the time.
Yeah.
It's like second language. Like, it just comes out so fluidly, like normal, the self-negative talk, the self-shame, the I'm fat, or, like whatever it is becomes such a normal part of your vocabulary. And so meditation, like, has been such a catalyst for me, because you have to quiet your mind.
Yeah.
And that is such an exercise, and you have to work diligently at that, because your mind wants to run game. It wants to run game. It wants to tell you what to do. Like, you'll try to lay down and it's like, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do. Remember that conversation 3 weeks ago? And ruminating and ruminating and ruminating. So there's a lot of ruminating. There's a lot of guilt, fixating on situations, conversations. There's a lot of CPTSD, which is complex post-traumatic stress, PTSD. There's all of that. Like, the first, few months in my house, was very difficult, because like the air condition would suction the door, and I'm thinking it's him busting in the room every night.
This is after you left.
This is after I left, and
so you were in your own space.
In my own space,
still having thoughts that.
Right. Yep. Waking up, being afraid that my kids, were gonna be gone in the middle of the night, like things like that. So, I really had to have like a good support system, because without that, it was very lonely, if not. And I'm grateful, I have my therapist, had you, and you know, there was a lot of other people surrounding me during that time, whether it was like helping with finances, you know, donating school supplies, like anything, you know, I had to put myself in a space of vulnerability to ask for help.
Yeah.
You know, and that was really, really difficult in a society that condemns you for needing help or asking for help. Like, it's such a cliche thing to, like, you know,
Yeah.
ask for help at all. You know, it's like a waterfall of shame if you dare ask for help.
Yeah.
You know, because everybody wants, if you ask for help, it's like, look at this person looking for handouts and like all the, I worked hard to get where I am, and it's like, even that, it's like, why do we have to work hard? Why does everything have to be hard? Why can't it be joyful? Why can't it be with ease? Why can't it be exciting? You know, like, but it's really just been a battle of retraining my mind and healing that aspect along with healing my body.
So talk about your healing process.
Okay.
Like, what has that looked like for you? I mean, you can finish your statement, but
lots of aloneness.
yeah.
Lots of aloneness, like not dating, like
But that doesn't mean being lonely.
no.
It means sitting with yourself. and
Yeah.
being alone.
Being alone, like aloneness and loneliness are two different things. And
Yes.
for me, I had to really understand that, like, my peace was important and I wanted to protect my peace. And the codependency part is wanting to jump into a relationship. And for a minute, I did have that. You know what I'm saying? And because when you've been so deprived of that physical touch, anything like that, like, your body yearns for that. It craves that. It's
safe physical touch.
safe physical touch. Yeah, we're not talking about jumping back into something that's chaotic. But even so, like, that is a part of that, which is what creates the pattern.
Yeah.
And so I really had to start realizing that I could depend on myself and that I could trust myself, because I had been taught to not trust myself for so long. And that's a lot of religious trauma that has created that. I had to really dig deep and find my own spiritual connection with source energy and really develop a spiritual practice and rituals that help to uplift me, you know, that I could really, like, utilize to be a catalyst to, like, get me to that next space, you know. I don't know how to explain that, but, like, I started, you know, meditating. I had been meditating, but really I started doing it in a more intimate. It became a more intimate practice because I was really becoming safe with my body, and I was getting to know my body in such a sensual way and reclaiming my body. I was reclaiming my personal power. I was reclaiming safe touch for myself, you know, learning to touch my body in ways that I hadn't before. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And just, like, you know, dancing naked in my room, or, you know, whatever it was, like, that I needed to do to feel free, to move, to just be, and to be in the presence of myself and not always feel like I had to have somebody there, because I knew that that was codependency.
Yeah.
That it was okay to have a support system, but I was still very much codependent. And I had, like, you know, every time I had a question or, you know, like, I was always, instead of knowing that I could trust myself and listen to my highest self, you know.
Do you remember whenever you would, like, come to me and you would be like, I need your advice? And I'm like, okay. And we would sit and we would talk. And by we would talk, you would tell me what your situation was. And then you would go on to give yourself the advice that you needed.
Yep.
And then I would be like, you just realize that you just answered that for yourself, and then you're like, I think I just needed you to sit here.
But that still presence is like a thing. Sometimes you don't always have to have somebody physically say something to you or verbalize something. You just need somebody to listen to you talk out loud to yourself, and that really helped because I was able to finally start listening to my highest self and what that sounded like and what that looked like. And let me say, that can be a very conflicting process, because when you have been so conditioned to have self-doubt, to not trust yourself, you can't do anything right, you know, you can't trust other people, or you know, things like that, like that's a very difficult battle to overcome, to really start developing trust with yourself. And that can look like so many different things, like something as easy as taking yourself out on a date by yourself, with yourself, going to a restaurant and sitting with yourself, not having any company, and making that, like, those little milestones were so huge for me. Then I would go to a park, then I would go on a walking trail, like everything just started to progress. And I started wanting to do these things by myself, and I started to enjoy doing these things by myself. I wasn't waiting on other people to do them with me, because I would do that. Like, I would literally not go somewhere.
my own flowers.
Thank you, Riley.
Write my name in the sand.
Not a good speller.
Talk to myself for hours. That is a real thing.
I don't understand.
Yep. Talking to myself is real.
I have all the time.
Yes, it's a thing.
It's healthy.
Yeah, it really
absolutely
is, 'cause it helps you work things out, especially if you're like, whenever you're speaking out loud, and then people are like, who are you talking to? And it's like, me.
Meanwhile, society's like, she's crazy. Look at her talking about aliens. Lock them up.
I do have one more question for you, but I kind of want to save that till the end,
Okay.
and let that be kind of like our closer.
Because then I got questions for you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'll save that one until kind of the
Okay.
end of this episode, because I think that, because that question or statement, like that is going to unpack and be able to segue into other segue.
I like that word.
It's a good
It
word.
is weird. I really like corn.
It's got the juice. But anyways, and so I'll save that one till closer to the end, because I think that would be a great like closing topic of this episode.
Okay.
Of our podcast.
Cool. Cool beans.
I love
Beans. Cool.
Aww,
Yes, I know
my
my
sister's staff that she made.
Oh, yes.
And his name is Mr. Beans. She has like a real coyote head. I think I said that right.
I am dead.
Yep.
So dead. We're great. This is so great. Okay. And we are back.
Just changed my passcode on my phone.
I'm still like dying. Okay. So, we're gonna pick back up in this second part of the episode, and I'm gonna be asking you some questions.
Okay.
Because I know, you know, as the episodes progress, we'll get in obviously more depth and stuff. So, when did you first realize that I was in an abusive relationship? Like, as your friend, like, when did you notice? Did you have any concerns?
I mean, I would, because there would be times where, like, you would tell me something and then follow up with, you know, but everything's okay now or whatever, and then, like, in my brain, I'm like, that doesn't sound right. But I think that my awareness of it actually being, you know, a domestic violent like situation and like really learning what domestic violence is and really learning that it's not just physical,
right,
was probably about the same time. Well, no, I would say it was probably after the first time you left. Not really being able to put those exact words to the situation, but really being uncomfortable with that relationship.
Can you elaborate a little bit more?
Like, meaning like hearing how he would talk to you on the phone. I'm trying to think of an example. There was like one time, we talked about this the other day, one time that y'all were talking on the phone. I can't remember exactly what was said, but I just remember like thinking like, that's not right. You know what I'm saying? Like it's like he was trying to talk you out of your feelings. And
gaslighting.
Yeah, and it's like, I don't like that for her. You know, because I mean, ever since we were young, you know, you've always been the yin to my yang. Like, meaning like, you have always been calm. You've always had such a great heart, and you've always been one to stir away from confrontation and all of that. And
I'm a lover, not a fighter.
No, but she is genuinely.
Thanks, friend.
And I just remember like sitting there, and it's like,
unless it's about Harry
yeah, it just, she deserves better than that. You know, like thinking to myself like, you deserve to be with somebody, if you're going to be with anybody, that has the same heart as you on a genuine level, you know, not someone that's going to pick you apart,
right,
and then make it seem as if you're the problem. But then also, because I still wasn't in like a full awareness, like it's like I knew something wasn't right, I knew something wasn't wrong, or was wrong, but I wasn't comfortable with the situation. But then whenever you made the decision to go back, I felt like as a friend, like what a good friend was being supportive.
Ooh.
And so I was like, well, I support your decision. All while in my brain, I'm like, I really hope that it's better whenever she goes back. You know what I'm saying? Like, because I didn't feel like it was. But I basically gaslit myself into thinking that, or believing that you were going back to a changed relationship, and even being uncomfortable, but still like, oh yeah, you know, I think that things are going good for you guys. I think you guys are doing well, and you know what I'm saying? And it's like, even though I didn't believe it, but I would say it.
Ooh, that's a good point.
Like, and it's like I was trying to outwardly convince myself and you that that's how I thought.
Can you talk about like that dynamic in friendships of like how potentially that can often increase danger in domestic violence relationships? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, from being in a friend's perspective, from an outsider looking in, of what that feels like if you know that there's abuse happening, but like say when you more so started to come in more of awareness, like what that looks like of calling the police or like doing something or saying something.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
Because if I call the police or if I tell somebody, that I feel like something is going on or whatever, and then the police show up, or all of that, then, and you don't speak your truth in that moment because he's there, and you're terrified,
right?
Then they leave, and then it turns into, what the fuck are you telling her? And it makes that situation for you so much harder,
right?
And it's like having that inner struggle of, I don't want to make her situation worse, and not, like, just genuinely not wanting to make anything worse. But then also me, I never involved the police.
Right.
I'm that person that carried a hammer and a crowbar everywhere. You know what I'm saying? Like, thank God for you, LaTresha. Thank you, source.
Doing great.
Yeah.
Doing great.
But anyways, and so, and I mean, I remember telling you at times, like, if he ever lays a hand on you, you tell me,
And I wouldn't.
Nope.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
And
because from my end, like, I didn't want any physical harm to come to him, and that's such a strange place to be in, like, knowing that I was being, broken and battered and all of these things, like, not in just a physical perspective, but psychologically, like, really, but not ever wanting any harm to come to him, like, I was, which is a common thing, that's what a trauma bond is you become protective of your abuser, and this happens even in childhood, when a child is being abused, they equally love their caregivers, but they also have somewhat of awareness that what's happening to them is not okay and it's wrong and they're being hurt, but they're trauma bonded, and plus, what are they going to do? This is their caregiver. They have to depend on this person. And when you deal with that in adulthood and you get into an abusive relationship, a lot of people don't understand, like, you are dependent on that person because they make it that way. They don't allow you to work. There's severe isolating you from friends. We're going to talk about that. And so you are completely dependent on that person and you can't leave. So just to tell someone to leave, it's not how it works. Not how it works.
Isolation tactics, though.
So let's, how did it, well, I mean, we kind of touched on this a little bit, but how did it feel like, how did you feel through that experience? Let's talk about the second time for you in the middle of this, when I decided to stay again. How was that experience?
It was devastating. Because at that point, I knew exactly what was happening. And I knew that it was not a safe place for you to be. All while still feeling like the only thing I could do was, like, be there for you. Like, not, still feeling like I, couldn't call the police, but also really not thinking about calling the police because I always just, like I had said, had it in my mind that I would just take care of it. But I'm so glad that I have learned emotional self-control.
I'm so proud of you.
Emotional regulation. But anyways, but just feeling like I could be there for you, but then whenever you decided to stay again, it was like, I can't do this.
Right.
Not that I didn't love you and that I didn't want to be your friend, but it was so emotionally exhausting and taxing because I knew you shouldn't have been there. I knew that you deserved better and you needed to get out, but you had that like last ditch effort because he would present to you new things as if he were trying to take accountability.
Well, talk about not just to me, but talk about the times when you were also being presented with those things from him.
Oh man.
So this, I want to touch on this. This is also how abusers further entrap their victims by going to their friends, their family, and kind of being a whispering ear. And this kind of like, they can do this in many ways by like one, you know, again, love bombing the entire family kind of thing. And look, I've changed and I'm doing all these things. And then one, they can also, there's a lot of triangulation that happens during these conversations, and typically narcissists will tell each person something different, and it becomes what they call a drama triangle, where it's just a huge triangle of drama and each person has different information. So one friend might get, well, she's a cheating lesbian, and one friend might get, I love her so much, I have been abusive and I'm trying to change my behavior.
You know, he would pick and choose what he would say to who.
Yes.
Because he knew that with me, I was always going to have your back.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So with me, he had to try his hardest to present, I love her, I don't want to do this life without her.
Right.
I can't, you know, like, I know that I messed up. I know that I did bad things, but I have to do better for her. But then at that moment, my response is, no, you need to do better for yourself.
Right. Yeah.
Until you do better for yourself, you can never do better for her.
Yeah.
You know? And then he sent me another Marco Polo that I genuinely just never opened. And then by the time I wanted to go back and open it and listen to it, he had deleted the entire conversation because he had admitted things to me, like how he treated you, things he had done, and, you know, just really portraying this being sorrowful and remorseful for his behaviors. And so then whenever I wanted to go back and actually see like what else he had said to me, it was gone. Because then shortly after that is, I never said those things.
Yeah.
You know,
because we were in court by then.
Yeah. Like,
yeah.
I never said that. I never, you know, whatever. But like him contacting me started at the very beginning of y'all's relationship.
Yeah. Talk about that.
Like I remember, I don't remember particularly why the conversation came up, like what had happened between the two of you that made the conversation came up, but you had called me to ask me if you could give me a number. And I had like 12 thoughts just now in my brain, but then
about a phone number.
Yes, thank you. And because you had said that you had told him that he could call me and talk to me, like if he was having a problem or having an issue, like with y'all's relationship or something that happened between y'all, that he could call me and talk to me about it. And I would listen, and that I'd give good advice, and that I would never tell you what him and I talked about.
Yeah. So
you were like offering a safe place for him to come and talk about his feelings. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And you know, at that time, mind you, I was in my early 20s. You know,
yeah.
like, and so I was like, yeah, he can call me. You know, because in my brain's like, you know, this is the guy that my best friend's like with, you know?
Yeah.
I want to build a relationship with him, because I'm always going to be a part of her,
Right.
you know? And so I'm like, yeah, sure, he can call me. But, like, really, looking back now, it was just questioning me about you. Like, I mean, but like,
gathering information.
Yeah, like,
Mm-hmm.
what kind of person is she?
Right.
Like, would she ever cheat on me? Would she ever, you know what
And
I'm
a lot
saying?
of them are projections of
Yes.
their own things that they're
Correct.
doing.
And I just remember, like, no, like,
Yeah.
that's not the kind of person she is.
Mm-hmm.
And so you don't have to worry about any of that. Well, so then that's like solidifying for him from her best friend that you're not going to put up a fight.
Mm.
You know what I'm saying?
Oh, wow.
And then really, like, being able to,
Oh, that's heavy.
yeah.
Wow.
And it's like, in the moment, whenever it was happening, I'm like, I'm building a relationship with this guy.
Wow.
Like,
yeah, not realizing he's gathering information.
To use as a weapon.
Right. Weaponizing your vulnerability.
Correct.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, and like randomly, you know, him and I, we would have conversations, and, you know, throughout y'all's relationship, and, you know, he would talk to me about things and come to me, you know, but it was always kind of the same thing, like, but you have that situation misconstrued. Like, if she said that, that's
Right.
not how she meant it. Or
Right.
if she did that, her intention wasn't to make you feel that way. You know? And so it's like sticking up for you, but also giving him
The benefit of the doubt.
correct.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And it's like,
Do you want to talk about like the periods of time, like where we actually were not talking, like throughout our relationship? Because, you know, we have been best friends. We have been known each other since we were 5, but we really became best friends in 7th grade. We started developing a really close relationship because we grew up in church together. So that's where our connection first started. And then from 7th grade on, it was like we were joined at the hip. You know what I mean? So what did that look like during the times? Because there were a couple of them where we didn't speak for sometimes like a few months at a time.
yeah.
And like what that isolation looked like.
Well, the first time I remember was whenever we went to Japan.
Right.
And in that moment, I wasn't mad that you went to Japan. I just had the thought, oh, she's going to build her family.
Right.
But also not realizing, like, how I would feel after you left whenever I didn't have you physically. You know what I'm saying? But, you know, the codependency that you and I have, you know,
We done healed that.
Yes. Yes. And so then it was hard. One, it was hard to talk to you because of the time difference. But 2, it was hard to talk to you and hearing about the things that were happening and not being able to literally do anything about it. I couldn't just drive down the street to talk to you or to, you know, be there for you. Like, you were literally in a whole ass other country.
What was the first thing that you remember me telling you?
Whenever there was the incident about, I don't know if this was the same night or a different night, but you calling me about you hiding with your son in the closet, or not in the closet. I keep wanting to call it a closet.
Yeah.
But it was in the stairwell because of how he was acting, and I don't remember all the details verbatim in like right now. But I just remember you being terrified, you know, and then calling me whenever he like lost his shit because he lost at a video game, and he like basically destroyed the apartment and hit a lamp, and the lamp fell and hit Dakin in the head.
Yeah.
Like, and it's like, but then it would be followed up with, but we're okay now.
Yeah.
You know,
I had to quickly.
like we talked about it, and so it's okay. you know, and it was just very difficult, and I had to avoid you. I had to avoid you because I couldn't handle hearing what was happening and not being able to be there, but also like having the mindset of, you know, she chose this.
Ooh.
And it's like, I'm the friend and I'm going to be supportive and I'm always going to be supportive, but that doesn't mean I have to talk to her.
Yeah.
You
But
know?
that's the truth.
Yeah. I mean, and it is the truth, but in the way that it was happening, it was more being avoidant than it was just taking a step back to
evaluate.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was just, you know, I mean, because you would try to reach out to me on Facebook and you would call me and, you know, all of this stuff, and it's like, I can't. Like, I remember, like, looking at the posts on my page or, you know, seeing a missed call from you or getting a voicemail or whatever, and literally just looking at it, and then I'll worry about it later.
Well, and see, that's the thing, like, the isolation happens so quickly, you know, well, we happened so quickly in general. Like, I was married, pregnant, moving to another country with a man that I didn't know within a 7-month time frame, while he was already still married to his ex-wife with other children from that marriage. So I was the new supply to that, but I didn't have any form of communication other than an email, and that didn't even happen for quite a while. So I'm in a completely different country, pregnant. I flew when I was 8.5 months pregnant and didn't have any line of communication to speak to my family or my friends or anything, because we didn't have cell phones right away. We didn't have, you know, internet right away. He had to buy a computer, you know, and so then you went and helped my parents. Even they had to go purchase a computer. Someone had to take them to the store, show him how to do that, and then I remember you going over there and having to teach them how to use the internet and Yahoo and Skype. And so, like, this happened over months, you know, to be able to get even a line of communication established for me to have anyone to talk to.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But I will say that the last time that you and I quit talking, that was the hardest.
Yeah, I agree.
Because at that moment, I had an awareness. You had an awareness. We had a plan. And just like that, it was like stripped.
Right.
And I'm staying. And I had to throw my hands up. Now, I'm not saying that I was, you know, like, right, because I mean, I know that I was like super emotional and, you know, coming up with like a bullshit excuse or whatever as to why I needed space, and then I just quit answering your text messages.
Yeah.
I quit. And I did, you know, I was being avoidant in that time too, but it was with a different intention. I just, you know, you are my person. You're my best friend in the whole world. And I remember thinking, it's only going to be a matter of time before it goes right back to what it was. And, you know, months went by, and I just missed you. I mean, I would cry. Like, I cried a lot. Like, I literally had to grieve our relationship, what I genuinely wasn't sure that we would be able to rebuild.
See, and I was doing that as well, and I was being told that you were the bad person.
Yeah.
You know,
There was extreme manipulation. Do you see what she did to you? This was your best friend. Do you see how she treated you? Did you see what she did? And because of not only gaslighting, but the delayed processing that also happens with being neurodivergent, we don't always process conversations in real time. It can take days, weeks, months to really like sit and replay a conversation and be like, that's not what happened.
Right.
And that comes from also like just extreme gaslighting. When you're gaslit so much like that, like your brain don't have time to catch up, especially when there's word salad happening in these conversations. And so that's what was being projected onto me. And I was like, dang, yeah, she did do that.
Yeah.
She did. Is she trying to get with me? Like weird shit that I was being told, you know, like she must want more from you than just a friendship. Like all that stuff that was, I'm just like, what kind of shit is this? Like we have been strictly a platonic relationship, but it's funny how people over the years have like really projected that, like not even just him, but other people like being in a, and I'm like, you know, that's where, you know, we'll talk about that in episode, just normalizing platonic relationships. But
yeah, I remember, I mean, maybe 4 or 5 months, I don't even remember what I text you, but it was like, I know I ended it with LOL. It was like some joke or funny remark or something lighthearted. And then you were like, I knew that this is what was going to happen.
Yeah.
You know? And at first, I didn't know if I was ready to genuinely have like a real conversation with you. But I was grateful when we did. Because that's one thing that I can say that I've always been grateful for is the fact that you and I like take the time to learn and grow with each other. And we have taken the time to communicate.
Yeah.
Like truly.
Yeah. Communicate
and hear each other. And that moment whenever we came back together and we really talked about our feelings and we were raw and we were real. And I mean tears and snot were involved, you know, like but that was such a pivotal moment in our relationship because not only were we learning to dismantle the codependency that we had created with each other, but it was like another stepping stone to being like, this is how a friendship is supposed to look.
Right, and choosing each other.
Yes.
You know?
Like this is what a healthy relationship is supposed to look like.
Right.
Because we were able to have that, the hard conversation, but no, you still love me and I still love you.
Right. And see, I was always afraid to communicate a lot of my bigger feelings to her out of my own fears of rejection and abandonment wounds. So I was afraid that if I was to say something to her that she was going to get upset or leave me, and none of those things were true. Those were just things in my head, you know. And
I mean, I might get snappy, but I ain't going nowhere.
But I'm like, it's so uncomfortable. I just wanted to like pee on myself anytime those thoughts came up, and I'm just like, I can't do it. But yeah, like I know that when we came back, I remember we were so petty too. Let me tell you, mind you, we were still, you know, we never deleted each other off of social media and stuff. But it was so funny that we were both having the same feelings, seeing each other, like, you know, out and about or, you know, whatever. And it's like, I wanted to message her so bad, but I didn't. And I was just being stuck up my own ass, you know, not wanting to reach out or, you know.
She has a life without me.
Right.
She's having fun and I'm miserable.
And we were both thinking the same thing. And it's like, no, I was crying in the naked shower.
And then I had a mask.
Go and
put on a smiley face to pretend like I was having fun whenever on the inside I was
I was dying. Oh, it was terrible. But like, we met in front of a pond, sat in the car, and just were so raw and vulnerable with each other. And I remember looking in her face, and I said, I have to leave. And at that point, I had started seeing my therapist again because, you know, I was manipulated to stop seeing her because he had participated in 2 different sessions. And I remember when I restarted with her, you know, I couldn't let him find out that I was seeing the same person, and I changed her name in my phone and all of these things. And I remember even hiding the any notifications from my phone at that point because I was trying to create a safety plan. And I remember looking at you and just saying, like, don't let me stay.
Yeah.
And I grabbed your hand and I was just like, I'm serious. Like, I cannot stay again. Like, and I need you to help hold me accountable to that. Like, don't let me go back to this.
And girl, every time you say something, I'm like, he's a piece of shit.
Change his picture in your phone. Why do you have this ringtone? Change his name. Why does it say my king? Like, all of these things. And I was like, ugh. Like, yeah, like, I've got to stop trying to portray him in a way that was not true, you know, to what I was being shown, to how I was treated in his character. Because one thing, you know, a lot of people don't understand is, like, when someone apologizes for their behavior, that apology is followed by changed behavior. And an apology without changed behavior is not an apology, it's manipulation. It's a distortion. And a genuine apology comes with changed behavior, and it doesn't happen again. And sometimes it might, but there has to be like a constant awareness of, like, because there has to be some patience and compassion. You know what I'm saying? But not to the point to where your kindness, your compassion, your empathy impedes your self-respect for that person.
Correct.
You know?
They are not worth that.
No, and you're not a doormat, but I allowed myself to be a doormat to that type of behavior for so long.
One of my favorite things that I've heard come out of your mouth, even though, like, I had heard it, like, from a TikTok or whatever, but whenever you said it out of your mouth was, I have to fill my own cup, and I only give what runs over.
Yeah.
So I'm not taking from my cup to give to someone else. I'm not leaving myself without. And for me, as your best friend, hearing you say that is so, like, finally. You know what I'm saying? And I know that it's, you know, like an ongoing struggle because I still,
Yeah.
you know, that's something I struggle with too, but, like, you know, outside of myself, like, hearing someone who has been through what you've been through and who has given so much of yourself at the expense of your own sanity, your own happiness, your own self-worth, your own joy, like, you literally diminish all of that for the expense of someone. But now, like, seeing your process and being a part of your process and, like, just getting to be your best friend and hearing how you speak now and, like, about yourself and how you use your voice. And, you know, I mean, I know, you know, it's a process and, you know, whatever, you know, some days are better than others, but, like, it's amazing.
Thanks.
Like, genuinely.
Thanks.
Like, because I didn't know if I would ever get to see that Maralen. You know what I mean?
Shit, I didn't even know that.
You know?
I had no idea.
Because, like, in my brain, I'm like, you know, you don't need to do that. Like, you don't need to check in with him. You don't need to da-da-da-da. You don't need to tell him what you're doing. Like, which none of those things are false. But it's like, but I understand why.
that scarcity mindset
Yes.
too, you know.
But like,
I don't check in like every 10 minutes, you know.
yeah, but I wanted you to like find your voice and do whatever you did.
Yeah.
It was a beautiful thing.
It was pretty great.
It
was pretty great.
was.
I can't wait to dive into that.
Yes, like for real, and we will. We'll get into all of that, but like just, you know, and it's like it's still an ongoing process, and it's still an ongoing situation.
Right.
Do you have any more questions?
No, I think the last thing I really wanted to just like, has been the biggest lesson that you could say that you have learned throughout this journey together, like as friends, like, you know, for you?
I feel like that's such a loaded question because we have so much history.
Yeah.
That there's been a lot of lessons, but I think that in our particular relationship, I have learned that I can be loved unconditionally no matter how weird I am. You know, because, you know, I've been asked, you know, by my therapist, you know, do you have anybody in your life that you're afraid is just going to leave you, or that, you know, how did she word it? Something like, do you have anybody in your life that you feel like is not going to leave you, or something along those lines. I can't really remember exactly, but I'm like, Marilyn. And it's not that you can't, you know, because you absolutely can. You're your own person. But it's like the never. But like, it's like I've been able to know what it feels like to have hard conversations with somebody without having the fear of rejection and abandonment. I've been able to squirrel brain. I've been able to know, literally my brain just went blank.
It's alright.
It just gave up on me.
It's
It said, you're done.
Time's expired.
Yeah, but no, like, I've literally learned so much. I've learned, like, be you, be authentic, be, you know, as weird and sunshiny that you want to be, you know, but don't do it for the approval of anybody other than yourself.
Right.
You know, and like being able to do that, but then also share that with somebody, like it's a beautiful thing. You know,
Yeah.
like it's like you and I, we don't always agree.
Right.
I mean, don't get us on the weather. But you know,
elaborate just real quick.
every time she'll check the weather on her phone and she'll be like, oh, it said it's gonna be this.
Here she goes. Oh, let's see what my weather app says. My weather app says
And then I go through the whole 10-day forecast.
that it's going to be 82 degrees Fahrenheit on Monday from 2 a.m. to 4 p.m. She's so precise. And if it's 1 degrees even off of what mine said, like I'm rounding up here, okay? And bless you. I just love you so much. But it's like her body just won't let her not check it.
This is a true statement.
Every time, if I say like, oh, like it's supposed to rain today. Oh, let me check. Well, my weather app doesn't say any signs of participation. Participation. None of that. And it's like,
I'm not doing it to like prove her wrong. My brain just is literally like, check your weather app. Check your weather app so you know for yourself.
So you know for yourself. Yeah. But that's good information to have. Like, you gotta always check, you know, when you're given scientific facts and stuff, you gotta check for yourself.
But if we talk about the weather and I reach for my phone, don't you do
Oh,
it.
wait. It happened one other time, and it was with Harry Potter. We were trying...
Whatever we ended up both being wrong.
We were trying to go through and say all the Harry Potter titles of the movies, and like we both were like stuck.
We're like,
And it was like on the third one, and
it's like this movie was, I forget which title it was.
dude, it was like The Prisoner of Azkaban, and golly,
It's
we
like-
were going round and
I
about.
was like-
She's like, no, it's Half-Blood Prince, and I'm like, no, it's not. And we went back for like 10 minutes until we finally Googled. I was like, shit, we both fucked up today. Word. Spirit was like, ego check.
For both of us.
It was so great.
Yep.
So great.
So, you know,
Yeah.
like we don't always agree, and that's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
It really is, because we talk about it.
Yeah.
You know, like
Yeah.
if I say something that you don't agree with, you know, can you explain, or what makes you feel that way?
Yeah.
Or, you know, and it's not immediate like criticism, like
Right.
why are, like, no,
Yeah.
it's this or it's that, or, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? And it's like we genuinely just hold space for each other,
Yeah.
and that is what a relationship is. Friendship,
A healthy relationship.
yes, a healthy
Mhm.
relationship.
Yeah.
And it's like, that is a beautiful thing.
It really
It's
is,
like,
yeah.
it's like we're two completely different people. I mean, we're a lot of like, but we're literally like yin and yang.
Yeah.
You know, we have the little dots of the other color in
Mhm.
our big
Yeah.
array of color, you know.
Yeah.
But it's like we understand each other.
Yeah, there's such a balance. Like, it's like the things that I don't really like to say the term lacking, but like there's that balance, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Of like things that I may not be as well like voiced in, or like whatever it could be. It's just like we complete each other
Yeah.
in that way, or add to each other's pep, I should say,
Yeah.
in that way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, because this is not a depleting or exhausting
No, maybe.
relationship.
Mm-mm.
Like,
It
genuinely.
made me struggle with fatigue a little bit. But
Yes.
today is one of those days.
Yes.
Back to school week, so
Yeah.
we're
Back
bombing
to
it out this
school.
week.
Back to school.
Back to
To prove to Dad I'm not a fool. Got my lunch packed up and my boots tied tight.
Mhm.
I pray I don't get in a fight.
I feel like that's a song that I would have made up.
Yep. Billy Madison.
Yep.
You're welcome. Copyrights to the Billy Madison people.
Well,
Madison Productions.
thank you so much for sharing today, and
I do have one more final question, and we don't have to get into it.
okay, sure.
But distractions. Okay. The last thing that I wanted to say, and whether we can, you know, make this like, you can answer it a little bit, or we can ask the question and then pick up with this again on our next episode.
Okay.
Talk about your current court case, and not only going up against your ex, who is a decorated veteran
Mm.
and who is still working in the military as a civilian,
Mm.
but also about the court systems that have countlessly failed you and your children.
Yep. We will see you in episode 2, my friend. Thank you so much for being here present with us today. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you continue to subscribe and follow and share whatever it is that you feel led to do. I hope this resonated with somebody today and somebody felt heard and seen. We love that. That is what we're striving to do, is through sharing our stories and storytelling and our lived experiences, that we can help be a survival guide, for somebody else. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Welcome to the Marvelous
Mystonic Muggles. That wasn't planned, but it worked great.